well, he gave a talk at Northwestern, and my sister or somebody told me that he mentioned you. Okay. So he sends me the video and he says, go to 30 minutes and 49 seconds or whatever. And I look at it and he's got this slide up of resources. And he says, and there's this lady in California who calls herself Twitchy Woman. I thought, okay, I gotta find this guy. So I got in touch with him, and he spoke to my Sunday morning group, maybe a month or two later, and it's a huge hit. And he is a PhD professor at Northwestern in physical therapy. He teaches at the medical school. Right?
I do. I'm a PhD. I'm not an MD. So
Yes.
do ask me do not ask me very, very complicated.
He doesn't prescribe medicine.
About your medication. I'll just say, do what your movement disorder specialist told you.
So,
and if you don't have a movement disorder specialist, you should find them.
So anyway, so everybody here is connected somehow to me or to Daniel. And for those of you who I don't know, it's so nice to meet you. And for those of you who I do know, thank you for coming. And it's great to see you again. It's so nice to be able to do things in person again. I just got back from Barcelona, as did a couple of other people who are here. Daniel was supposed to be there, but due to health reasons, couldn't make it at the last minute. But he's here today, which we are very grateful for. And somebody gave your speech last week using your slides, but added her own commentary. Wasn't quite the same, but it was your speech. It was your slide deck. So anyway, I'm going to give you the microphone, and I think what I'm going to do is let people want to ask questions about the work, the studies you were doing. One really unique thing that he does, he has a monthly meeting with people with Parkinson's, and he asks us what we want. What are we looking for? What do we want to learn? What do we want him to investigate? How can we help? And we kept hearing in Barcelona about researchers in Parkinson's who have never met a person with Parkinson's. I don't know how they can do that, but if you're in a lab with a rat, I guess it doesn't matter. Anyway, Daniel. Do that.
Thank you, Sharon. That was very, very kind of you. One of those people who thinks humor is great. And anybody calls herself Twitchy Woman, if you happen to be my age and you love the Eagles, you just have to meet Twitchy Woman. Unfortunately, when I talk to my students, of course, some of them haven't heard of the Eagles and they haven't heard of the great song, but we educate the younger generation as to where the great music came from. There's a walk in Chicago every year, Parkinson Foundation, and my favorite group there who walks, they're called the Martini Shakers. I just had to go and meet the Martini Shakers. And I think there was comedy in Barcelona in our physical therapy program. We're bringing in more and more comedy. We are working with people to kind of teach stand-up comedy, because I think if you're having fun, and if you're amused, I think it's good. So I can just answer questions, and if I can't answer them, I'll tell you I can't. But if any of you want to join the Zoom meeting ever, the reason I do it is that I was getting more and more questions, very clever people. When I'd answer one question, they would hit me back with two questions, especially my good friend in Holland by the name of Dave de Groot. So I thought, oh, I need to Zoom. And in that way, we can walk our way through the question. But the one thing you learn when you're a professor, one question gives rise to the next question. Right. So I never let my students say, oh, and this is the last question. I always say to them, the next question. It depends how you answer the question. So who'd like to ask the first question? Yes.
How many people in this group have Parkinson's? Raise their hands.
As I said in Barcelona, it's a tremor-free zone, so don't be embarrassed.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 of you.
At least.
So I can tell you, my guess is that you 9 look after yourself. because I've got a pretty good eye. Seen a lot of people since 1994 when I went on sabbatical at the Institute of Neurology in London. So I've got a pretty good eye. And the fact you ask the question means it's not self-evident. And I think that's a great testimony to the fact that you look after yourself. And I think the evidence is crystal clear that if you look after yourself, the disease will progress possibly slower, but your symptoms will be reduced, and it's good. So I think looking after oneself is terrific. Yes.
Most people talk about high intensity exercise being the best. But isn't it sometimes
So the question, which is a very, very good question. So I have published papers and I advocate high intensity endurance exercise. And the evidence for this is clear. But it is also the case, what is your name, please? And as Matt pointed out, well, it can crash your joints. So then you ask the question, well, is it a good idea to crash your joint? And the answer to that is no. So I'm going to give you a long answer. Now, the nice thing about talking here, if I give long-winded answers elsewhere, there is no consolation for the people. Here, you just walk over to the bar. So anytime you don't like what I'm saying, you just go and get yourself some alcohol, talk with a friend over there.
Or if we like.
Well, if you like what I'm saying, you can drink, you may even like it even more. So, if you have, actually, I'm going to talk to all of you because my default position is that a person with Parkinson's disease is just a person. Okay. Now, yes, you go and look inside the brain, there's a little part of the brain where there's a little bit less dopamine, and that loss of dopamine does cause problems. But the prescription for Parkinson's disease is exactly the same as for healthy people because healthy people age. And if you don't have Parkinson's disease, well, you may end up with mild cognitive impairment. You may end up with dementia. There are 100 different kinds of dementia. And so what I'm going to tell you applies to everybody. It is not Parkinson's specific. The thing about Parkinson's disease actually is for many people, it's a wake-up call. So for many people who haven't looked after themselves in terms of health and wellness, they've worked too hard, haven't prioritized health and wellness, and then the disease forces them to rethink what their priorities are. And if you ask yourself, do people with Parkinson's disease now exercise more than the general population? For sure. So about 28% of people meet CDC guidelines, recommended guidelines. I think in Parkinson's disease, it's much higher. So the prescription on what you should all be doing is perhaps up to 30 minutes. Give a nice warm up. It's very important, especially with Parkinson's disease. You've got stiffness, you've got rigidity. It takes a little while to get the system going. So you warm up, exercise at the 30 minutes with your heart between 80 and 85% if you measure heart rate. Or if you think of a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 being as hard as you can go, you exercise at about 7 to 8. This is called RPE, rate of perceived exertion. And then you have a nice cool down. The importance of the cool down is that it allows the system to kind of return gently to its normal level. This is particularly important for people who have tremor because exercise can exacerbate tremor. So in the short term, you ask yourself, why are you exercising? Well, my friends who have tremor say, I'm interested in the long-term part, but they also have the day-to-day dealing with tremor, and so you have a nice cool down. Now, if your body is beaten up by the treadmill or beaten up by walking on concrete, have you ever tried rowing? Okay, because rowing is much, much more gentle on the joints. And the point here is you get your heart rate up. Why? Because you want to drive blood through the brain. Why? Because you want to oxygenate the brain. Why? Because you want to drive nutrients through the brain. Now, if you don't like the treadmill, you don't like, by the way, you don't like walking down in Santa Monica, then I think there is nothing that's going to work. Okay. So, I mean, you live in a wonderful part of the world. Okay. Cycling, the evidence for cycling is very, very potent. Whether you cycle on a Peloton, the two there. And by the way, if any of you haven't had your workout for the day, you should just go in there. There are 2 Pelotons just waiting for you.
One Peloton and one 30-year-old life cycle.
Well, in that case, run quick so you can get the Peloton. So, I don't want to get distracted by something. I want to make sure I answer your question. Okay, so the treadmill can cause damage to joints, etc. There's no question, especially if you're on the younger end of the spectrum, which you are, and especially if you're quite fit, because you'll then be going quite fast on the treadmill. So you can try rowing, you can try an elliptical, you can alternate throughout the course of the year. So you can do 3 months on the treadmill, 3 months on the elliptical, 3 months rowing. Now, swimming is very, very good for you. And swimming doesn't damage the joint. And then there's cycling. So there's 5, 6, 7 modalities which allow you to do this. And you should listen to your joints, because otherwise you have to stop, and it's painful, and it's uncomfortable, and it's going to happen. So you can have problems with your calves, or your knees, or your hips, or your ankles, or your back. You go to a good PT, of course, and if you warm up and cool down, some of those you can mitigate against. So if you're not very supple, if you're getting very kind of rigid, then maybe you need stretching program. But I am very much in favor of programs like yoga. So if you kind of pair the yoga, so if you really want to do what is best for yourself, then one has to find a way to get the heart rate up. But one's also got to work on mitigating, of course, against all the negative side effects which can come, especially on treadmill and running. That I think is true. That's not what I actually. So what I said. What was your name again, please? So what I said to Matt was basically what people should be doing, but okay, you can think of being at different stages of the disease. But whether one thinks of oneself as being mild or earlier on, maybe the first 3 to 5 years, and moderate and severe, and whether when one is more moderate, one can really still do the high intensity, that really is an individual issue. Now, from your point of view, there's no question that if you keep going, you can maintain what you have, or at least diminish the rate at which one declines. Whether you can get some back really depends what you're doing with the PTs. One of the things which becomes more, well, let me ask a question. I asked this question this morning. How many of you here do weight training, progressive resistance training? Well, that's pretty good. That's more than most. Not as good as this morning. Out of 56 personal trainers, 56 did it. I thought, wow. When I talk to my doctor of physical therapy students, it's about a quarter of them. And I tell them this is a mistake. And so it does sound to me like maintaining strength becomes really important, because what happens 70 to 80, 80 to 90 is when many people forget the disease. They start to become frail, and frailty is just bad. No way around it, because the next step after frailty is death. Okay, frailty to mortality. And so one of the quote unquote cardinal signs of frailty is muscle weakness. So one of the assessments is a hand grip strength. And if your hand grip is starting to get weak, it's an indication that your whole neuromuscular system is going into decline. So for you, I would certainly encourage the weight training. So the problem with going to physical therapy is you can't go all the time. Do you have somebody else who you train with, or a program that you go to?
Physical therapist is twice a week. He's great. He's really easy to know. He really cares. He's been my physical therapist for many surgeries prior to Parkinson's. He's very well versed in Parkinson's. He's read up. He's an interest in my thing. There was something he didn't have very easy that he developed. And he has other patients. But he puts me on. Yeah, I always people think you do the exercise in public. It's a belt on me. So he put me in precarious conditions. You know, it's like he'll put four the spots together that really you get your left foot in, and you help hold my hand, hold the belt, and lift my leg in, and standing, I get my balance, and then you squat with it, which is amazing that I can do it. It gives me a great thing. Opportunity. So he goes in. He does a whole program of that. I come home, we were about 5 minutes. I'm wiped out. I have to skip. I gotta go lie down, for an hour.
Yeah, it certainly seems that you're getting the best therapy. There is certainly no question if you've had the disease for 13 years, some of the symptoms you have are part of the disease, and you are working very hard to mitigate them. And you found somebody who's very knowledgeable about PD, which is good. So I began by saying that there are many, many common principles. There are. Okay, so the generalized exercise prescription applies for PD, healthy people, diabetes, cardiovascular problems, metabolic disease. But then certainly freezing of gait, for example, is unique to Parkinson's disease. And so if one ends up with freezing of gait, then one does need particular expertise to help you with it, and people who've understood how to help people with it. So for example, people that developed laser walking sticks. So you have a stick with a flashing light. People that develop ways of giving auditory feedback. There are ways you can have a stimulus applied to the sole of your foot, stimulus to the back of your leg. And then some people do very, very well with kind of marching music, super marches. So there are things which are particularly unique to the disease. And then you need people who are experts in that part. So I'm not talking out of both sides of my mouth, although some of you may think I am, but there is definitely generalizable principles for everybody. And then there's specific, unique tricks to help people with Parkinson's disease. Yes.
I'm a wife.
Oh, yes, I had gathered that. Of that there was no doubt. Okay.
Lana, I would suggest that you talk to Daniel afterwards. Okay, yeah, because we have some other questions. We have Amy and Gerard and Yvonne. Okay,
Amy,
You have
So my husband doesn't have Parkinson's. So what's the best exercise? But he's over 50, go figure. I didn't rob the cradle, mistakes are made. But
you still got time.
that's true. Anyway, but what's the best exercise we could do together? Like the high intensity that would be okay for, no one noticed like Parkinson's because I'm uncoordinated to begin with. But what's the best, the safest for me and the best for him that we can both improve our longevity? Or is it?
That question is very clever. I've thought about the general principles. So I've written an article on what is called dyad training. And this is the idea of two people training together. And there are many, many benefits for this. One of the benefits is people become more and more advanced, very different to you, then their partner has a significant care burden. And that care burden then requires that they need also to be looked after. So you don't just think about the person who, and this can be any disease. The person looking after somebody with a disease has a burden. And so finding ways for them both to work out together. One possibility is you hire a personal trainer and you ask them to develop for you a personal training schedule, which will have some cardiovascular. So the reason we do endurance training is because the lungs are very important. The heart is very important, and it's the only way to really work the heart and lungs. One way to do it is you have adjacent bikes, like we have next door. Another way is you have adjacent treadmills. You can have adjacent rowing machines. And a trainer can put something together. Another thing you can do is resistance exercise, and actually working in pairs is very good, because one normally does maybe 10 reps of a particular exercise, and then one spouse, partner, caregiver can do 10. And then the other thing is just to find activities that you enjoy. So if you really want to do something together, you want to take your husband and you want to go dancing. Okay, dancing is arguably one of the best things you can do for Parkinson's disease, because it's all about balance. So there's no question that if you have Parkinson's disease, at some point in time, your balance will be impaired. But there's a lot you can do to limit. And so I would suggest, say to him, well, let's go dancing. I'm quite sure there's got to be dancing in LA. There's got to be every kind of dancing. And what if you turn around? Now, some of you may think I was paid to say that. I absolutely deny that. Okay. I have mentored 20 plus years Madeline Hackney, and Madeline's done the best work on dance. She was a professionally trained dancer, appeared on Broadway, and then became a neuroscientist. And she probably has 15, 20 articles on dance, and it is crystal clear. So if you want to do something with your husband, but I think you would be well advised to hire a really good personal trainer. I'm sure one of you knows somebody. If not, I can find you somebody, and then ask them to give you basically a couple's workout. Next question. Yes.
Are you familiar with Orange Theory?
I am very much familiar with Orange Theory. What do you want to talk about Orange Theory?
I started doing it here.
Great.
And it's great. And very flexible. I don't have to meet all the targets, but when you were describing what would be good, they have the rowing, they have the treadmill, they have the elliptical, they have the whole thing, and they're working on your heart rate. So I think it's very helpful.
Well, that's okay. No, I mean, I think it's great. Okay, Orange Theory is great. So who has no idea what Orange Theory is? Okay, well, all these exercise programs, somebody's always coming up with something new. And tell me when I go wrong, okay? So theirs is very much heart rate driven. So you put on a heart rate monitor when you go in, and you spend time on the treadmill. So for those of you for whom treadmill is not great, probably not good. Okay. Then they have rowing machines. These rowing machines are good. And certainly you could ask them if you could substitute a double row for the treadmill. So if you reach a point, I'm sorry?
They have a couple of elliptical.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Okay. The ones I've been to don't have elliptical, but yes. So they're obviously getting wise because they realized treadmills come with a cost. But I don't want you to walk away thinking treadmills come with too much of a cost, because the nice thing about treadmills is you're walking, and that walking and increase in cadence and increase in stride length transfers to overland walking. That's the reason all my studies use treadmills. Okay, I'm fully aware of all the other mediums, and I'm fully aware of the fact that you could have muscle strain, etc. And then the third part is they give you lots of weight training. It's better to be lightweight, high repetition. And so the idea is to keep your heart rate up for an hour as you cycle between these three. And for those, how many of you listen to me talk on Twitchy Woman? Well, if you remember, I had an email from a lady who in 2015, quite depressed, quite down, quite negative in her feeling about herself. And she sent me a wonderful email about, and she sent a picture. I mean, she looked like a diva. I mean, she was just terrific after 1,500 sessions of Orange Theory. So yes, and at the end of the day, the important thing is you got to find what you work. Well, sorry, you have to find what works for you. I doubt you all drove the same car here. Different car for different reasons. I happen to drive in a car, and the driver loves one word: acceleration. There's one particular car which is really quite great for it. Okay, never driven in a Tesla. Somebody jumped in a Tesla, but not everybody likes 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds. Some people, this is. You know, and so, but as you can see, so we're all different. And you got to find something that is sustainable. What I do, I work on things that are sustainable for life. So I picked up rowing because it works the arms, the back, the abdomen, as well as the legs. And so it really is, and that's what they do at Orange Theory. So Orange Theory, I'm not in the business of advocating for any company. I don't do it. I would advocate for their principles, and their principles seem to be sound. Now, there's at least a third question. But
Okay,
the third,
Gerard had a question and then.
I know as much of the question was we had conversation, training. Over 20 something. I found that the good movement strength, power, strength, endurance, there's different principles. And so what I usually do is I start with modalities that clients can handle, movements that they learn. So within the first 6 weeks of movement, what usually happens, it's more motor control learning than it is physiological changes, which means if you're learning a pattern, how to move, how to actually move the weights in your body, and you get many, many neurological changes in the first 6 weeks, more so than the muscles are suddenly strong. So it's very important for the clients to really learn how to move properly. Then you work on speed in the same modality. So what I found is that, again, I've got a wonder if there's a science behind this. I do. But if someone's, let's say, doing a squat, right? They're doing a loaded squat. They're used to different type of speed that they're used to doing it safely. Eventually, they master it, and then you add in double time speed. So they know how to do the exercise, but now they have to work more fast twitch fibers. They have to work more anaerobically than just aerobically, so that they can then really master it. From there, you work on those double tensity, then you work on reactive neuromuscular. Which basically is now the client has an idea what the movement is, but doesn't really know what the movement is. So you have to call out verbal cues, you have to give them visual cues, but they don't really know which direction it's supposed to go, what weight they're going to use, what the environment is, because that's life. Like this, you never know whether there's going to be a divot in the ground. But if you exercise only knowing what's to come, then that doesn't really translate as easily to life. So you have to get the foundation first and then move into the reactive and robust. One thing that came up in my mind is that you were a basketball player. In basketball, you never know where the ball is going to be at all times. You're constantly pivoting. Your proprioception of where you are in space has to be. And I feel like that is a huge element that really needs to be, for Parkinson's especially, that needs to be part of the process. So start with the foundation of good, positive strength training, master the movement, get strong, absolute strength, get more muscular endurance, continue to do the cardiovascular work throughout the whole thing to get blood flow to it. And then work on the reactive. That's the beauty about dance. There's different patterns, but you never know what's going to be 4 feet out or 2 feet out, right? So that I love every client I have. I want them dancing as much as possible. They're working every plane of motion. They're working with many different speeds. They're working with different tempos. That's so important to me. That is so much more important than someone coming into a gym and doing bicep curls. So I think that's a beginning point, but you've got to translate that further on through the full program. And I just wanted to piggyback on that and get your thoughts on that type of program that I think.
Well, you kind of thought that maybe I know more than you, but I'm not sure that I'm not sure that you don't know more than me. So I agree with all of that. I agree with all of that, and that's exactly right. At the end, I'll give a longer. I want to make sure we answer all the questions, but then I can talk to those of you interested in my view of healthcare to come. And it will piggyback what you said, exactly what you said.
Okay, so we'll take 2 more and then.
I have a question regarding your own personal level of exercise. When do you know when you reached your max and when you should cut down a little bit? Because if I do a lot of different things, I do dance, I do ping pong, or exercise, I play tennis. But swimming is great, but it's the exercise that takes the most out of me. I don't know why, the energy level, the lung capacity. And when I swim, I do laps, I'm exhausted at the end of the session. And I'm wondering, did I do too much today? Because the rest of the day, I'm pretty much out. But the next day, I feel great. So I'm trying to think, is this the benefit of having worked that hard yesterday? But I lost my day yesterday after swimming because I couldn't really do much. So where do you know when to stop? And I'm not talking about injury because obviously injury would be the first sign of you have done it. But when I'm swimming, I'm not hurting myself. So where?
You're swimming 50 minutes.
Yeah, so you're asking very, very difficult questions, okay, for which there's no clear answer. So fatigue is arguably one of the biggest complaints for people with Parkinson's disease. So fatigue may be a big problem for you. Okay? For me, the single most important thing about exercise is that you listen to your body. So the advantage of a great personal trainer, just like a great coach. So for some athletes, a great coach will hold them back. But you can absolutely overtrain. And there are articles everywhere. And you look at ballet and dancers, they've nearly all been injured throughout their career. And so one can do too much. There is no question one can do too much. Now, for you, when you mention that you kind of lose a day, well, you can ask yourself, well, am I happy losing Sunday afternoon? So you do your swimming Sunday morning, you go to one of the wonderful English pubs down in Santa Monica, have a nice pint, and you sleep for 3 hours in the afternoon. And I don't think that's losing a day. I just think that's a great Sunday.
I do have great following. The next thing. Challenge.
Yeah, so the one thing that there's some people just don't like to monitor heart rate, don't like to track what they're doing. They just, want to do what they do. But I think for you, for a while, you want to keep a diary and then see what happens. And if 15 minutes is wiping you out, then maybe for 4 weeks, just try 40 minutes or 30 minutes. Or if you're really swimming hard, every time you go in, you kind of tell yourself, I'm going to do a mile, because at 50 minutes, you might be, depending how good a swimmer you are, you may not be that short of a mile. And so if you're going in to try to really work out, you may want to do less. You may want to also ask yourself what you do the day before and the day after. So for example, for me, if I cycle really hard, then what cyclists do, they don't actually rest. They go out for a recovery. And just moving the muscles very, very gently is actually better than doing nothing. But they keep their heart rate way down. So the body is just recovering. So I would look at how a week goes. And if you're too tired, cut back until you find what works for you. I've spoken to many people with PD recently, and swimming does seem to get hard.
Yeah.
Okay. I gave a talk in Nashville and talked to this person. My suggestion to him was to do a little bit more weight training. He wasn't doing very much weight training, but if you're losing muscular strength, then swimming is going to become harder for you. So, best I can do at the moment, but monitoring what you do, okay? And if after certain exercises, you just got to have a nap, well, actually, there's nothing wrong with a nap. I think I actually love my afternoon. I think it's the highlight of my day. And certainly when I work out hard, it's necessary. I think we have some more questions. Who was next? Yes.
How do you know if you're doing enough exercise? I'm doing more exercise than before I was diagnosed with PD. I have more time to do more exercise. I do more exercise than most people I know without PD. But how do I know if I'm doing enough for myself with PD?
Well, I would say that if you're doing endurance training 3 times a week, trying to get your heart up, you're doing weight training twice a week, and then if you're doing a little bit of flexibility, that's more than enough. Okay, now some people do more. They may throw in dance, they may throw in ping pong, they may throw in rock steady boxing, they may throw in aqua aerobics. And some people, and there are many people like this, for whom the E word is just not part of their vocabulary. Now, you are one of those people for whom the E word is in your vocabulary.
It's the only thing I have control over that I can do to help slow the progression of this disease. So when the doctor told me that, I just embraced it. I said, this is what I need to do. This is my prescription. I have to do this. So I might as well like it.
Yeah,
and,
but
and I do things I enjoy.
Well, there are ways to make it more enjoyable. Someone can walk with friends, etc. But more is not better. Okay, there's definitely a point of diminishing returns. The opening question was all about joints and ligaments and pains that you get. You can absolutely overdo it. And you can underdo it, but I don't think you're in the underdoing it category at all. Anybody else? Well, the last one.
2 questions.
You got as many as you like.
Bonus.
I've lost my.
A question and a bonus one.
No, here we go. Are you ready? So that I don't have an argument with my Uber driver here. What's the minimal amount of time so my heart rate needs to be up to be to profit by it?
Kind of make me sound like an investment banker because you want me to give you the rate of return on your investment.
10 minutes?
You need more than 10 minutes. No, I want to be clear here, okay? Is 10 minutes better than 0? It absolutely is better than 0. But if you go into the cardiac literature, or if you go to a cardiologist and you ask the cardiologist, am I better off with a high VO2 peak or a low VO2 peak? This is the ability to consume oxygen. If you're watching the Tour de France, these people are just elite people with an amazingly high VO2 peak. You don't need anything like that. But you'll find that, the frail people, okay, they can barely, the oxygen that they need to survive is very close to their VO2 peak. So now when they have to go up and walk or chase a grandkid, they get out of breath very, very quickly. The only way that I know of raising your VO2 peak is that, I know by your look, you don't like this, okay? At the end of the day, there is no other way. Do you need to do it? The answer is no. But is it good for you? The answer is absolutely yes. So 30 minutes, 3 times a week with your heart rate up will do wonders for your cardiopulmonary
And
system.
we'll do wonders for our.
Well, that is what it is. Well, I think you have a delightful Uber driver. Let me just leave it at that.
Another question I have is, exercising when slow you walk, is there any benefit doing that? Where, you're not at your peak, your cinema's not at your peak, but you still like push through it. Is there any benefit of that?
So you've raised a lot of questions here. I don't have the disease, but what I'm going to tell you is what I learned on presentation, and it was recorded. So if you send me an email, I'll try to figure out. I've done quite a few, and I tend to forget. But I had the privilege of talking with a group from England, organized it. And on the call was a PhD lady who has Parkinson's disease, and she addressed this in some detail. Her view is, if you're just not feeling it, just don't worry about it. There's always tomorrow, okay? Because there are some days you just don't feel it, okay? Now, if you're having too many of these days, then you need to see a movement disorder specialist and figure out why, okay? But we all have days, it's just not there, You may have had a wonderful swimming session, wiped you out, the next day is great, and then the following day, it's just not quite there. One shouldn't feel guilty about rest. Rest is really, really good, rest and recovery. Now, you also mentioned cinema. So one of the challenges, one of the questions I often ask is about medication management. So for some of you who've had the disease for a while, you get dyskinesias when you start your medication. You have a steady plateau for maybe 90 minutes to 2 hours. You get off-stage dyskinesias. You have a period when you are off, and then you take your medication and you come back on. Okay. Then the real challenge is to time when you work out, time your medication so that you hit your workout when your medication is working optimally. And so I think I've answered your question, but ask me a third question to make sure I absolutely have. And actually, you could always ask your Uber driver to ask a third question. By the way, the drive over here was the best Uber I've ever taken by a long, long way.
Thank you.
Just here's a quiz here. Can you talk about pain points? Why is pain points so great?
Well, why is punk so great? Well, the question is, I could let the two No, Frank, please don't stop. I wasn't, the only thing I was potentially interjecting is that I see a huge fundraiser being organized for people with PD, Trent versus David.
Lisa McEnroe, I'll lose.
I want to thank everybody for coming, and we actually have quite a few people. If you are interested in ping pong, you can speak to Trent, Bob, Maureen, or Sam, who's back there. If you are interested in, we've got other things, dance. I'm Rachel, talk to Rachel. If you're looking for a personal trainer, Gerard is here. Are there any other personal trainers? We have some PTs in the room. Andy's a PT over there. So there's lots of options that you can talk to them and ask them about what they do and how they can help you. And I want to thank everybody and just eat some more chicken.
Thank you all for coming. It is such a privilege to meet you all. Actually, if I could talk for just 1 minute, okay, because I did say at the end, I would bring things full circle. So this is a little bit of, it's almost philosophy, but not often I get a chance to talk to a group of people like you. So you can think of the American healthcare as working in one of two ways. One is called a fee-for-service model. So at Northwestern, it's a fee-for-service. There are other places which are value-based. And I'm working with a colleague, a place which does value-based. It's Intermountain Healthcare. And the idea there is they get so and so much money per person with a disease. And if they can manage the disease for less money, then they make the profit that way. And so my colleague, and I'm helping her with this, are putting together a program for people with Parkinson's disease in Utah. And the idea is you're first given a rigorous evaluation. And if your motor skills are not really too good for some reason, then everything you outlined is exactly what the person will be put through first. Okay. And the term that has been developed for this by my friend is neuro-restorative PT, but it doesn't have to be PT. I mean, it's neuro-restorative whatever. And so everything you said fits in with that. Now, somebody who comes who's reasonably well coordinated, then perhaps they may go more quickly into the kind of exercise-driven program. But, you know, one of the things that I'm quite convinced of is that until we have more of the medical system using approaches designed to keep people well, the country's going to run out of money. I cannot keep putting as much money into the medical system in terms of fixing problems. And so the answer is to keep people well longer. Yeah. So what you said is entirely consistent with that.